This video is all about solving problems that involve percent of change. It's lesson 47 in your book, and it's on pages 296 through 298. So first we need to know what percent of change is. Percent of change is the ratio in the amount of change in a quantity to the original amount expressed as a percent. The percent of change can be a percent of increase, or it can be a percent of decrease. Now, we actually have a formula that helps us come up with percent of change. Notice that this word right here, ratio. That means that we're going to have to divide two numbers. Now, the ratio we're looking for is the amount of change in a quantity divided by the original amount. So, in order to find our percent of change, we take the difference in the two amounts, or how much it changed, and divide that by the original. Now, to find percent of change, you always use the original amount, not the final amount. So you find the difference in the two amounts, so the original minus the final, or final minus original, and then you divide that by the original amount. Now, since we want it in percent form, we're also going to multiply that by 100. Here we have an example, and this needs to be in your notebook. We want to find the percent of change. If the number of United States airports in 1985 was 15,161, and the number of airports in the United States in 2005 was 19,854. Now, we need to know what percent of change are we looking for, because two things are changing here. The years are changing and the number of airports are changing. Well, the percent of years that have changed, in this case, doesn't really matter how many years have passed. What does matter is how many airports have been added or taken away in those 20 years. So what we want to do is find the difference in the numbers of airports. So I'm going to take the final number of airports, which is this because it happened later, 19,854 airports. And I'm going to subtract the original number of airports. My original in this case is the earliest one in 1985. So 15,161. Now, I'm subtracting these two numbers, and that will give me the difference in the two numbers. But what I also need to do is divide that difference by the original amount, or the earlier amount, which in this case was 15,161. And then when I'm finished with that, I'm going to have to multiply it by 100. Notice we've got our formula right here, the difference in the two numbers divided by the original and times 100. Now I'm going to use order of operations to solve this. So the first thing I have to do is to subtract 19,854 minus 15,161. And when I do that, I get 4,693. And I've still got my over 1561 and then my times 100. Now then I do multiplication and division from left to right. So I'm going to have to take this 4,693 and divide it by the 15,161. When I do that, I get about 30.95. I'm sorry, 0.395. That shouldn't be there. So 0.395. 3095. Man. And then I've still got my times 100. I'm thinking ahead, guys. Sorry. And so when I multiply 30.3095 by 100, I get 30.95%. So between 1985 and 2005, the number of airports in the United States increased by 30.95%. And I know that this is a percent increase because my final number is bigger than my original. So it increased, it was a positive 30.95% change, or you could say increased 30.95%. Now here's another example that needs to be in your notebook. Here we have the number of taxi cabs in the United States in 2001, which is 31,800, and the number of taxi cabs in the United States in 2002, which is 30,800. Now we want to find the percent change in this case. So we have to find the difference in the two numbers, so we're going to take final minus initial. Now our final number was 30,800 because that was in 2002, which is later than 2001. So we're going to take 30,800 and we're going to subtract our initial amount, which is 31,800. That gives us the difference in our two amounts. Then, according to our formula, we divide that by the original amount. Now, the original amount always came first, so 31,800. And then, after that, we're going to have to multiply it by 100. Now, I'm going to go through the order of operations here. Remember that this division bar acts like a grouping symbol, so the first thing I need to do is subtract. 30,800 minus 31,800 is a negative 1,000. And we're dividing it by 31,800. And then multiplying by 100. Now we'll multiply and divide from left to right. So negative 1,000 divided by 31,800 comes out to negative 0.31. 0.031, sorry. And when we multiply negative 0.031 by 100, we get negative 3.1%. So our percent change is negative 3.1%. Or, since the number dropped between 2001 and 2002, I could say that it decreased by 3.1%. And when I say decreased, that takes care of my negative. All right, so now let's talk about shopping. We know that when we shop, a markup results when a percent of increase is applied to a cost. So when your cost increases, that's a markup. A discount results when a percent of decrease is applied to a cost. So markup means that we're increasing, and discount means that we're decreasing. We're going to use that to solve some problems. All right, so here we have an example that needs to be in your notebook. It says a music store marks up the price of the CDs they purchase at $9 each by 70%. What is the markup and the new price of each CD? Well, they purchase the CDs for $9 and then they mark them up by 70%. So we need to find out what is the markup, or how much money do they increase the price by, and then what is the price that they sell those CDs for. So the first thing we need to do is find out what is 70% of $9. So I'm looking for what is 70%, and when I write 70%, I write it as a decimal, 0.70, of, which I know means times, $9. All right, so I need 70% of $9 to give me my markup. $70% of $9 is $6.30. So since they mark up by 70%, the markup is $6.30. We also need to know the new price of each CD. So we know they cost $9 originally, and the store marks them up by $6.30. That means they add to the price. So I have to take those $9 that I started out with and add the markup, $6.30, and that gets me a total of $15.30. So my new price is $15.30. All right, now here's another one that needs to be in your notebook. It says a bookstore is having a sale of 40% off all items. What is the discount and new price of a book that originally cost $12? We know that when they have a sale, they take that percentage off of the original cost. Here our original cost is $12, and they're giving us 40% off of that $12. So I need to find 40% of $12. So I write 40% as a decimal, 0.4, and I'm finding 40% of means multiply, $12. When I multiply 0.4 by $12, I get $4.80. So my discount is going to be $4.80. All right, now I also need to find the new price of the book. Now it originally cost $12, but they're giving me a discount of $4.80, which means they're taking $4.80 off of the price. So I'm going to take my original price minus my discount. So $12 minus $4.80 gives me a new price of $7.20. This is our final example, and again, that does need to go in your notebook. In 2006, the 100-mile Beads Walkathon for Education, Advancement, Development, and Success raised $36,000 for girls in Africa. The organizers hope to raise $100,000 in 2007. What will be the percent of increase in the amount raised? So remember, for percent of increase, we take the difference in the amounts divided by the original, and then we multiply that by 100%. Now here, we want to find the difference in our two amounts. So they hope to raise $100,000 in 2007. Previously, they raised $36,000. So to find the difference in those two amounts, we'll subtract them. 100,000 minus 36,000. And we're going to divide that by the original amount. Now notice in 2006, that's when they raised the 36,000. 2007 is when they're hoping to get the 100. So our original amount is $36,000. And then we'll multiply that by 100 to get our percentage. Now when we subtract 100,000 minus 36,000, that gets us 64,000. And when we divide 64,000 by 36,000, we get 1.77, and I'm going to round it to 8 because it's 1.77 repeating. So now we have 1.778 times 100. When we multiply 1.778 times 100, we get 177.8%. So the percent increase in the amount raised, if they raise $100,000, will be 177.8%. Now that makes sense because we've increased this relatively small amount by almost 3 times as many to get 100,000. So it definitely is going to increase by more than 100% because we're raising more than $36,000 more. So 177.8% increase is our solution.